Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Nicole Berry, the Executive Director of the Armory Show. Thank you all for joining us today for the virtual Curatorial Leadership Summit event. This is the first event in a series created by the 2023 Curatorial Leadership Summit Chair, Adrienne Edwards. Her theme for the 2023 CLS, which will culminate in talks at the physical fair in September, is Curating the Institution. The series will highlight models of curating that encourage us to imagine how we can work differently to expand and broaden institutional relevance. Adrienne Edwards is Engell Speyer Family Curator and Director of Curatorial Affairs at the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York City. She co-curated the 2022 Whitney Biennial and was president of the international jury of the 59th Venice Biennale. Previously, she served as curator of Performa in New York City and as curator at large for the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis. Edwards has also curated projects at Pace Gallery, the Walker Art Center, ICA Boston, and the Wexner Center for the Arts. Edwards has taught art history and visual studies at New York University and the New School, and is teaching at the Graduate Center, CUNY, New York in spring 2023. Some housekeeping. The chat function has been disabled, so please type any questions you have into the question and answer feature. We'll leave time at the end for questions and hope to get to as many as we can. This conversation will be recorded and will live on our website after the discussion. We're very much looking forward to an informative conversation with our esteemed guests. Thank you all for being with us today. Adrienne, I'll turn it over to you to introduce your guests and begin the discussion. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you to the entire Armory Show team for inviting me to chair the Curatorial Leadership Summit this year, and for your really incredibly generous assistance in organizing today's program. I am tuning in from Harvard, where I've been yesterday and today, and I just want to also thank the person who has let me kind of sit in their office and do this program. So thanks, Chris. I'm really grateful to Eva Respini and Candace Hopkins, who've been wonderful and generous collaborators for this year's Armory Show programming. It's been a real joy to work with them. I think when the invitation came, both from Eva and Candace and from you, Nicole, I sort of thought, well, there's this thing that's been turning around in my head for a long time, but especially I think since 2020, which is really this question. And I feel like this whole program is really constellated around a series of questions that I feel like we will begin today and continue into the fall. But it is, what are the kinds of cultural institutions that we need today to thrive? And we are now 3 years past this sort of intense period of reckoning for arts organizations. And what I want to say is it was not only in the United States, but this was also a kind of reckoning that was much broader than that and as deep as ours in certain contexts. So certain questions that I've had from my own work that informed this discussion. So I'm sort of taking all of my angst and putting it onto you all and hoping that we can have a conversation around it is, actually, how have we done in meeting the objectives that we set forth at that time? And how are we meeting our complex responsibilities to our local constituents within a field that is deeply international in terms of its purview and has its own set of expectations? And how can we think creatively about intertwining the threads of our work? And this word intertwining feels really important to me. And then how can we best approach our collaborators with reciprocity in ideation, resources, and mutual service? We often think about the future as something imagined, as a possibility that we're sort of holding out for. And I wanted to bring together Koyo and Angela and Benjamin very particularly, because I feel like they have work that is already in that future, right? Like for them, in the very Sierra L. James kind of sense of things, that their future is in the present. I feel that they model dynamic and open ways of working within institutions and amongst people. And most importantly, perhaps, and sort of what informed the titling of this program is curating not only exhibitions, but also institutions. Like, what does it demand of us, this sort of shift, this sort of pending request from our public and our people, which encourages us to kind of imagine how we can work differently, expanding and broadening our relevance. So I really feel that the spaces that these three brilliant minds, true visionaries, work within are the kinds of spaces that have something to teach us about how we as curators, as organizations, could be better. And with that, I will pause and hand it over. I believe Koyo is up first. And thank you to the three of you for being here. I am immensely, immensely grateful to you.
Thank you very much, Adrienne. Thank you for this introduction. Thank you very much to the Armory Show for having me this afternoon. There is so much that is always done for artists. So whenever something is done for curators, I'm always extremely touched and moved and happy to participate. So that said, welcome to my very exciting talk that consists of only 2 slides. This is only because I want you to listen to me and not be distracted by any images. And there is actually a byline to this presentation. The byline should actually say how to go from 100 square meters to 6,000 square meters. Basically, how you go from raw material company, which is a small, very powerful organization in Dakar, Senegal, to a very large institution in South Africa, which is Zeitz. So some places have presence, and actually I think all places have presence. The question is how the presence of all of the places' components, parts, may be cultivated and supported, and to what extent energies born from historical entanglements and confrontations are left latent or are allowed to flourish in order to make sense of this presence. In Dakar and Cape Town, there are many sites that have presence, and the site is understood as being a far deal more than just square meters within a spatial 3-dimensional delimitation. So, but for many people, Dakar, in relationship to the place, to place is shifting, as it is across the planet for everyone else, basically. Climate disaster is rapidly reshaping the contours of our physical environment, and the resurgent right-wing ideology is making claims on the rights of human movement in a manner that recalls some of the 20th century's most darkest moments. It is with ever greater urgency that as individuals and institutions, we have to examine the relationality of how we inhabit, not simply occupy, the various sites across which we move. This leads me to think about how, as curators, we may make the presence of a place visible and how we may work with a resolute sense of place. This task is made all the more pressing, fueled by the knowledge that in so many instances, institutions, artistic, cultural, social, economic, or otherwise, have historically worked to quash the truth of the place. I am currently driving to the deep south of the US, and it is heartbreaking to see how many truths of the different places that I'm navigating, that I'm passing through, are crushed down or not made invisible. So inseparable from this endeavor is the necessity of asking questions around the politics of presence, the logistics of access, and the pervasive forms of exclusion and discrimination. In a bid to sharing the guiding lines of how I have worked in my work and I have approached this issue, I like to talk about institution building as curatorial practice. thus referring to a notion that has been a preoccupation of mine over the past 15 years, both in my work as independent curator in the context of developing and founding raw material company, the Center for Art, Knowledge and Society in Dakar, as well as in my current position as the Executive Director and Chief Curator of Zeitz in Cape Town. As Raw's curatorial practice and the scope of its work grew from strength to strength, so has my own interest in the way that art institutions encapsulate and act on different forms of curating. In line with the proposition by Aminata Draman Traoré, the Malian economist, social scientist, and patron of the arts, that Africa must recover the immaterial part of herself, that which feeds her imagination. I am more and more convinced that art institutions are not only products of their environments, but that they are also active agents capable of shaping their societies in return. A quick introduction to the genesis of Raw is perhaps necessary at this point for those of you who are not familiar with what this organization does. In 2008, Dakar, situated at the continent's most western point, could boast of a relative dynamism in terms of artistic action and intellectual production, the city being the best known in art circles for the biennial it has hosted since the early 1990s. In the 20 years following the independence, Senegal had and still has a centralistic model of state-led cultural production, a hangover from the French colonial period, and reinforced under the president poet Engell. The structural adjustment programs of the 1990s, however, brought an end to the state support, and while the cultural arms of the international diplomacy and a small number of collectors contributed to an art scene, this led in general to a significant shift in style and content that was tailored towards the top-down goals of international development and the misplaced and distorted notion of what traditional African art should be. What's more, by the 2000s, there was no formal space to address theoretical ideas around contemporary artistic production. Raw material was thus born out of the necessity to create a space for sharing knowledge, a place that would provide access to contemporary artistic theory, and in return, generate discourse, ideas, and practice. What is important to note here is that Raw Material Company emerged at the same time as a significant number of other private non-commercial art centers away from the epicenters of the Western art world. My curatorial engagement with this shifting landscape of contemporary art on the continent was made particularly potent when in 2009, I was invited by David Ajayi to curate the contemporary section of Geographics, a map of African art past and present, celebrating 50 years of African independence at Palais des Beaux-Arts in Brussels. I was growing more and more wary of curating exhibitions and was not interested in doing another show lining up the usual suspects that have been widely promoted and celebrated over the last 30 years. So in my thinking, I gravitated towards the question of how the continent of Africa, after 50 years of independence in 2010, is really determining its artistic landscape. I figured that independent art institutions have profoundly altered and shaped the art scene. And so instead of inviting artists for an exhibition, I invited 7 art institutions, including Appartement 22 from Rabat, DAF 1718 from Cairo, CCA Lagos, and many others to present their modus operandi, their strategies, and the ideas in progress. The art institutions became the artworks, and their directors, the artists, so to speak, if we can use that. So while art centers in the West have been buckling under the strain of budget cuts, more and more seem to be opening in the rest of the world. These spaces set themselves apart from state-affiliated institutions and the commercial art market, with many of them addressing an artistic and critical void in their local environments. Some aim to establish self-organized, non-hegemonic and experimental fields, such as Cata Invertido in Mexico, who function on a collaborative workshop model. Some are deliberately questioning institutions established by the post-colonial state, and many try to fill in where the public sector has floundered. Dollar Art in Cameroon, for example, was founded in 1991 in direct response to inadequate legislation on freedom of association in the country. SUD, its public art triennial, is a platform for experimentation and intervention in the urban space in Douala and the proposition for new forms of citizenship in an exciting turn, for new form of citizenship, in an exciting turn that at RAW, we passionately encourage new forms of South-South cooperation and transcontinental networking, including diasporic community, were put in motion. RAW is, for example, part of Arts Collaboratory and a horizontally organized, collectively run funding network that includes some 25 independent art centers situated in Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and South America. In this sense, these are art centers, and the new synergies they produce through collaboration are going a long way towards demystifying imperial legacies of geography as they work together on both practical decision and artistic projects. Despite inevitable variation of specific cultural settings and sociocultural parameters, the core urgencies of these organizations bear the same motives and are unbound by geographical definitions. They embrace a diversity of practices and are complicating Western assumptions about what authenticity means with regards to regionality. Context and relativity are tools imperative for these centers in organizing different flows of ideas and production. These art centers are spaces of proximity that know their audience intimately and are therefore well positioned to engage deeply with their environment. Curator Simone Jami, by no coincidence, the artistic director of the 2016 and 2018 editions of the Dakar Biennial, argues that the creation of these spaces is therefore, I quote, a political gesture that proclaims the primacy of the people over the state apparatus, end of quote. So in tandem with the growth of independent art institutions away from the West, this has also been a notable shift in understanding what a curator does and their role in society. Today's curator working in an independent art center in Dakar, Medellin, or Jakarta does far more than that which is framed by the norms of contemporary art. It is thus at this point constructive to pause on the term of curating, because it is essential to revisit that term that is not protected by any form of, academy, so to speak. The tropes of the international contemporary art world, with its close ties to market mechanisms and the strictures of academia, do not necessarily leave space for thinking deeply about artistic practices on the African continent. We must also remain attentive to linguistic precision. As in RAW, we are working in a country where the official language is French, but where the most widely spoken language is Wolof, all the while heavily anglicized in our practice by way of our relations beyond Senegal's borders. In the Cambridge English Dictionary, the verb curate is equated with the process of selection. In Rafal Niemoyevsky's essay, The Aspirational Narrative of a New Curator, he guides us through the overuse of the term, referring to curated hotels, curated menus, curated workouts, curated playlists, and the list goes on. In French, the parameters of the term are tighter. There is no verb at all for our practice, which someone suggests that there is no action at all in what we do. So one is a commissaire, or those du commissariat. A commissaire is someone who is responsible for a commission, There is clearly a disparity between the two definitions, and we see how in the English language, curating has become an umbrella term for an ever larger host of different activities centered around selection, whereas in French, the connotations are with either the police or they suggest a somewhat teleological economic exchange. The need to think about processes of curation and artistic practice that go further, that take into account the shifting roles of the curator as well as methodologies of societal care, and whose interests are neither commercial nor purely aesthetic, has pushed me to engage with undervalued artistic practices. We are forced to think about what skills and knowledges people have that come from outside the academy or outside the mainstream art world, but that already do or have the potential to feed our artistic ecology in ways that raise awareness on topics that contemporary artists address. We have been inspired by the work of collaborators such as Chimurenga, the Pan-African platform for writing, art, and politics, who directed the second session of the Raw Material Company's Academy program, and who deliberately stretched boundaries, as they so beautifully put it, I quote, "Unless we push form and content beyond what exists, then we merely reproduce the original form, let's say the colonized form, if you will. It requires not only a new set of questions, but its own set of tools, new practices and methodologies that allow us to engage with the lines of flight, of fragility, the precariousness, as well as joy, creativity, and beauty that defines contemporary African life." End of quote. So now I'll move over to 6,000 square meters. When I took over Zeitz as executive director and chief curator in 2019, I took the time to think about what the museum needed. One of the most important things is to move away, for me, was to move away from the ubiquity of group exhibitions. This doesn't mean that Zeitz will no longer be doing any group shows. As a matter of fact, we recently opened When We See Us, a century of Black liberation in painting, which is a massive group show with nearly 200 artworks and over 150 artists. Rather, I intended to give priority to retrospective dedicated to an artist or a collective in order to bring out the aesthetic genealogies, the intergenerational influences. An example of this is the Shooting Down Babylon, a Tracy Rose retrospective, which opened last year in 2020 and which is currently on view at Queen's Museum in New York. I am orienting the museum towards individual exhibitions and retrospectives in order to write other pages of our art history. We must not forget that for the last 30 years, contemporary art has always been contextualized to group shows. This allows us, as well as the rest of the world, to affirm the richness of this production. There was a need to play catch up, and I participated in it as a curator. Then in 2020, the global pandemic happened. As a space, we had to respond to a local context. The first ground was for me, of course, the fact that we could not go back and reopen the museum and not acknowledge what we were going through as an institution, not acknowledge and the complicated experiences everyone made during that time. On the other hand, the other very strong impetus was to use this opportunity of the pandemic, of the lockdown, to open up the museum finally to Cape Town, because back then, I still had the impression that the museum had not fully connected with Cape Town then. Every museum, regardless of their curatorial purview or institutional ambition, has to have a very important and strong connection and relationship to the locality or location where they are. And up to 20, I still felt that this was not happening with Zeitz. So this is why we did this very public democratic exhibition. We invited basically everyone in Cape Town, professional and not professional, to bring artwork to the museum that they think they want to see in the museum. That gave us the exhibition, Home is Where the Art Is. And that also gave us the opportunity to discuss the value of art, the meaning of art, what art means for our public, for our audience, the very people who visit us almost every month. The pandemic also highlighted the need to strengthen already existing connections with organizations and individuals from an African continent. Over 5 days in September 2020, we hosted an online Radical Solidarity Summit. Over 5 days, we explored the notion of solidarity from different angles. It included discursive talks alongside performances, film screenings, and readings. In honor of the event, Zeitz is handed over the reins of our, socials to Black Star Lines in Kumasi, an experimental incubator of contemporary art and sharing community based in Kumasi, Ghana. We were so energized by the proceedings that we decided to translate the entire program into a publication that is coming out in a couple of months, both to record and honor what we feel was a pivotal moment in the programmatic life of Zeitz and to carry the energy and ideas sparked and forward and outwards. Since my tenure, we have also been investigating the meaning of art, the value of art, what is the role of art or the role of the museum in a city like Cape Town and beyond, particularly with the ambition as the kind of ambition that I am putting into the museum. Another element I added to the museum's programming was the Atelier program, launched as an experimental platform and residency that provides artists with an opportunity to create new work, conduct research, and develop ideas for future projects. The Atelier is a multi-gallery area situated on the museum's second floor. In addition to providing an exploratory space for artists, the Atelier is also open to the public, allowing visitors of Zeitz to have unique access and insight into the artist's modes of production and processes. The Atelier residency provides artists with a unique platform for reflection on their work within the public environment, as well as access to and interaction with the museum's visitors and communities through programming. Our current artist in residence is Ikshan Adams. Adams works collaboratively and communally to produce increasingly complex and large-scale works, and has used the residency to reconsider the pathways and routes of his practice. Each resident has a title and for their space, and Adam chose not working title. This reflects the open and experimental nature of the Atelier that Adams and his studio team would work within have been working with for the past 6 months. So I will stop here because I think I'm way beyond the time limit, but I think that because everything is a matter of perspective, and from my perspective, the world looks like this, as we see in this second slide. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Oh, thank you for that. So I'm next. Hello. I wanted to start off with my greeting in my Dakota language. Hello, my relatives. My name is Angela Two Stars, and I am an enrolled member of the Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate. I am the director of All My Relations Arts, an initiative of the Native American Community Development Institute. All My Relations Arts is located in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in the heart of the American Indian Cultural Corridor. We are a cultural destination highlighting the strength and resilience of American Indian people through visual arts. Our gallery hosts quarterly exhibitions that address ongoing topics that deepen the general public's understanding of Native people, history, culture, ceremonies, and language. All My Relations Gallery was founded upon the awareness that Native American artists were not receiving the same level of recognition, attention, or opportunities as their non-Native counterparts. And since then, our gallery has become a launching point for the artistic careers of many well-known Native American artists. Native American artists are continually faced with a variety of challenges to the progression of their art, including the lack of Native American specific galleries and venues, lack of curator training on Native arts, and an absence of creative placemaking within not just the larger community, but Native specific communities. NACD is committed to the idea that Native art should be more deeply understood, more widely practiced, more broadly recognized, and we work through All My Relations Arts to help Native artists and arts professionals with the next step in their career's progression, whether through exhibiting art for the first time in our physical All My Relations Arts gallery space, developing the curatorial skills in each of our shows, or learning how to take their art from the physical limitation of our gallery to the greater community. NACD continues to meet Native artists where they are in order to help them with the next step in their career. Oh, man. There we are. I myself am described as a product of NACD's mission personified. The gallery was my first professional juried exhibition experience, and I was then invited to serve as a first-time curator. Knowing that I didn't have any experience in curation, the gallery provided me with a curator coach who became my mentor, and the exhibition I led was addressing missing and murdered Indigenous women. I led the creative vision of a series of exhibitions titled Bring Her Home, Stolen Daughters of Turtle Island. This topic is an epidemic in Indian country, as 1 out of 3 Native women have experienced sexual violence in their lifetime, and Native women are murdered at more than 10 times the national average. So as my family had personal experience with this issue, I had an empathetic response and understanding that led my curatorial role. I feel like I acted more as a counselor at times than as a curator. Artists shared their vulnerability and personal family experiences, and their art created an impactful series of shows that addressed the need for awareness, advocacy. I think I went too far. Sorry. They created an impactful series of shows that addressed the need for awareness, advocacy, and resistance to this ongoing epidemic. Our cultural values as Native people lead the way we operate at our institution. These cultural values supersede our job positions. My mission in my Dakota teachings is to, above everything else, to be a good relative. And I apply this value in the way that I interact with our artists and our audience. I make sure people are taken care of, that our artists feel supported and welcomed. I don't see my role as a hierarchical position. On the contrary, I feel I work for the artists. It is my job to show their work to the highest caliber that we are capable of, because they deserve it. NACD works with an asset-minded optimism with the goals of impacting systems change in the way people work and interact with Native people. Storytelling and visual arts are an integral part of our identities as American Indians, and through art, we're able to share our history and an understanding of the diversity of the American Indian experience. Outside our work with the gallery, we work in partnership with local and national organizations. These partnerships focus on Native truth-telling and promote visibility of Native American people, and also provides placemaking opportunities for artists beyond gallery exhibitions. The examples I have here come from our partnership with Hennepin Theater Trust and is called We Are Still Here. These cohorts are led by a mentor artist with experience in the specific medium of that cohort. The first cohort focused on digital art and provided training to 3 new artists and grew the pool of Native artists working in digital art. Topics include truth-telling and history and knowledge of sacred sites. Because of the lack of understanding of US history and the sacred sites that Native American people are so commonly protecting. So it helps to have an understanding of these issues in order to understand Native people. The second cohort we're currently working with is working in mural art. We have 3 artists who have no experience in mural art, but they're learning to apply their art styles into mural design. And again, this allows us the opportunity to expand the number of Native artists that are working in mural art and sharing history and truth through creation stories, addressing Native American boarding schools and the rippling impacts they've had on Native families. And all of these projects are amplified through digital billboards that feature the artwork throughout the Twin Cities. So it's again highlighting the visibility of Native people. Excuse me. Public art is another area of creating visibility of our people, our culture, our language, our stories, and our history. This mural is in partnership with the Minnesota Department of Transportation, and it's highlighting the ongoing issues of homelessness and addressing the root causes that contribute to Native homelessness that have begun with colonization. This is an example of brave truth being told and telling that truth through a visual language that the general public can palate. Another example of visibility is this work with Northern Lights. This artwork used the 49-foot tall chamber of the Upper St. Anthony Falls Lock and Dam as a platform for artistic intervention. This was a 7-minute animation by Miri Villard called Medwayishka, which celebrates the resilience of Indigenous women on a spectacular scale. NACD works to fill a specific need to build collective power in the American Indian community through community organizing strategies and a deeply held belief that our people, culture, and power are everything we need to address the root causes of all the issues. At the foundation of NACD's work to facilitate change are our 4 pillars: community engagement, community organizing, community development, and Indigenous arts and culture. NACD uses these 4 pillars to strengthen community, build opportunities, and transform our community based on our shared Native values, traditions, cultures, and practices. These are community-led efforts to bring prosperity to the American Indian community. And with that, I want to say thank you for having me. It's been great to share space with you all.
Hi, thank you, Angela. Thank you, Koyo. It's so inspiring to hear you. I'm Benjamin, and I'm going to talk from Brazil, from São Paulo. And I'd like to thank, obviously, Nicole, Thomas, Davis, Adriana Fariette, and obviously Adrienne Edwards for the invitation. As Koyo said, it's really exciting to be able to talk about our work as curators, definitely. And especially, Adrienne, thank you so much for looking at what you call curating the institution, which I really think that's what we're doing. At least I think that's what I'm doing. And it's always very nice to be able to see that other people are looking at the same thing. And thank you to the 130 something people who are listening to us, because we know Zoom is a tough experience, both for who is talking and for who is listening. So thank you so much. I'll try and be fit in my 12, 13 minutes max. And I hope we have some time for discussion, Q&A afterwards. So basically, as Adrienne said, I do see my work as a curator less as filling up a room, filling up a space, curating a space, but I do see my work more as curating spaces, which means that for me, Casa do Povo, the people's house, this place here in São Paulo, Brazil, I work here as an artistic director, and my work is less about programming and curating the space, but Casa do Povo is my curatorial project, I would say. And indeed, I think it really stems from the idea that there's something wrong, as Adrienne said in her introduction. There's something wrong in the art world, but in the world in general, maybe, and that's a reflection of what's going in the rest of the world. We're like kind of disappointed by the way art is broadcast, by the general rat race, by the fact that everything ends up in consumption, that museums become service providers, full of shops and coffee shops, etc. So there's something wrong because there's critical thinking all over the place, but it feels like there's no critical institutions. That's why I called my presentation a critical institution for critical thinking, because we need to kind of ground critical thinking. Otherwise, it's just in the air, and it's very easy to be catched by other kind of practices which have no connections with what we think and what we develop. So I'm going to have like a short presentation, like a three-pronged presentation. First, I'll talk about culture as a shelter. Then I'll talk about how Casa do Povo is a porous institution. And last, I'll talk about how we work for the commons. What does it mean in Casa do Povo, which is the commons is obviously a concept that has been used a lot in the past 20 years, but I think it's always interesting to kind of connect to it in a way or another. So the first, I'm trying to move forward. Let's see if it functions. It functions. First image is to show you where I'm talking from. I'm sitting on the second floor in this building at the moment. And so we're in the downtown neighborhood in São Paulo. It would be like a borough, like for New York, let's say like Brooklyn or something like that. It's an immigrant neighborhood. And this is a 5-story building, around 3,000 square meters. I don't know if square meters means anything for the audience, but anyway. And basically, it was built in the 40s and the 50s. And I'm going to talk a little bit in the first part when I talk about culture as a shelter, about how was this building born. Because when Adrienne said that we need to look in the future, I mean, very often the best way to look in the future is to look in the past. And Ailton Krenak, an important indigenous thinker and poet, just published a book called The Future is Ancestral, right? So very often to look in our past is a good way to kind of, instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, to look at what can be done today. And Casa do Povo was created in 1946 by the Jewish anti-fascist progressive community in downtown São Paulo to remember those who died in the concentration camps. But the idea at the time, which is very beautiful, instead of building a memorial, was to build an empty space, saying that the best way to remember is to act, is to keep up, to be alive, right? What is interesting, we often talk about spaces, art spaces created by artists who are socially engaged and politically engaged. Here we're talking about people who were doing politics already in Eastern Europe, and because of censorship and dictatorship in Brazil, had to use culture to continue to do politics. So it's a bit the other way around somehow. And that's the inauguration of the building in 1953. So the building is packed by this leftist, anti-fascist Jewish community. And look at the arch at the end of the image, because the next image, just to give you a size of the building, you'll see it again, right? That's how I found the building in 2012, when I started to work in Casa do Povo, which is almost empty. So it's the same place. I don't know if people were smaller or the building was bigger, but it's a lot of people fitting in the room. And that's the same place today in 2023, but that's how I found it in 2012, when I started to try to rebuild the institution from the inside. So for this building, basically to remember is to act, as I said before. And each generation needs to understand how to remember. We don't know how we will remember tomorrow, how we want to remember yesterday, tomorrow, right? The way we remember changes a long time. And so this building is a living monument, an empty space. If you walk by the building, there's nothing to see, which is quite exciting, because often nothing is the open door for everything and for potentiality. And we tend to be like worried about filling up spaces, but sometimes just to let the audience be able to project itself and imagine what she, he, or they could do can be more exciting than the possible things that we ourselves are doing in the building. But what's interesting about this image is also the fact that I found a place called the People's House with no people. So my job was to kind of rebuild the people of the house. How to do that? What does it mean? And what does it mean to work with the public that you need to build almost from scratch? Because the neighborhood now is a Korean neighborhood. It's no longer a Jewish neighborhood. So when I came in, Casa do Povo felt very outlandish in its own neighborhood, a bit anachronical, which was, I have to say, very exciting. It was only a Yiddish choir singing every Monday in Yiddish, the hymn of the partisans for no one in a Korean neighborhood in Brazil. So that brings me to the second point, which is a porous institution. So how to rebuild an institution? Of course, I could keep it empty, as I said. I could also have killed it. And I think that's also is very much connected to what Koyo said when she said about listening to the spaces we work with. I could have also done something terrible, which is to do like a coffee shop and a reception on the ground floor, workshops on the first floor, galleries on the second floor, and residencies on the third floor. I would have killed the building. And I decided to kind of listen to what the building has to say and understand how I could also make it alive, turning it into a resource for other people to use it. And so that's the same second floor you saw being used by different people in different time. So instead of killing the building and defining the identity of each floor, dividing space, we decided to divide time in order to share space. So the same space can be used by different groups in given time. So you might have an artwork commissioned by us, by Renata Lucas, this flag that goes through the building, or also a seminar taking place in the setup built up by Amilcar Packer, or our boxing academy using the space for rehearsal or for sparring between the participants of the boxing academy. So we do not divide space, we divide time. And that's very important for me to understand how spaces can be more flexible regarding demands of our territory and of the arts in general. And this brings me to the fact that we also program the place in very different ways. I'm the artistic director, but I'm responsible directly for maybe only 10% of what happens in the building. The other 90% is developed by all the groups that use the space. They all have the key. So I ask you, do you have the key of any buildings, of any art centers that you use? Why is that not possible? Why can't you have the key of the places you use and you visit on a daily basis? So we give out the key. Some might call it radical trust, some might call it craziness, but it's a gesture. We give the key to these 25 groups who use the space. Some are more art groups, some are more like neighborhood groups, and some are more like, I would say, activist group, discussing rights to the city and other connected issues, like the boxing academy, or a psychoanalysis clinic, or pirate Bolivian radios, because we have a strong Bolivian community in the neighborhood, and so on, but also artistic group, dance group, etc., etc. So giving the key is a very simple technology, right? But I think it's also changed the whole governance, the way we look at the institution and who takes decisions, because this group can program the space, right? So there's what we do, of course. I showed you one commissioned work by Renata Lucas. There's these 25 groups using the space. And there's also what we listen to, which is something we started to do during the pandemic. We call it like community articulation. Maybe in English, we call it like deep listening, which is what museums usually call mediation. In a museum, mediation is about bringing people in to tell them what you do. We try to bring this the other way around. We bring people in to tell us what they want us to do within what we are, obviously. And that brings very interesting, unexpected coexistence. For instance, between an artwork by Rodrigo Andrade, this painting on the wall, and this open desk for people looking for their rights. And so they're surrounded by these paintings called 50 Shades of Red, because red for us is like maybe blue for North American. It was connected very much to more progressive forces, and it was criminalized during Bolsonaro's government. So this artist painted these shades of red in the building. This brings me to my last point, because I want to keep some time for us to be able to discuss. Even though there would be much to say about how we understand this programming in many hands, this decentralized way of programming, how we decentralize without losing total control, and also how we bring art, and maybe this previous images is interesting regarding that, in connection to other spheres of life. As I said, when we talk about critical thinking, etc., everyone will say that art shouldn't be separated from other spheres of life. But when you go to a museum, it seems like art is only from that time to that time when you enter the space, and then you do something else. So we create spaces that separate art from the other spheres of life. So during the pandemic, many museums went online and were like thrilled by the fact they could reach out to untapped public, whereas they were always reaching out to the same kind of public, except from other places. We decided during the pandemic to open more our doors instead of shutting down, open to the community and understanding how we could be useful to the community. Which brings me to the fact that if you want to attract other audience to your space, you need to change the program. people don't come, not because they don't know what you do, but because they don't care. So we have to listen to what they do, understand how we work, and really try and bring things together. Of course, there are some provocations, food for mind. Everything is a bit more subtle than putting it now, but it's the Zoom effect. I don't want to lose everyone listening to me at this moment. Anyway, I'm talking about these platforms from the commons, because I want to tackle one single thing to kind of bring my presentation to the end, which is the fact that what I'm looking for in Casa do Povo, in the people's house, is this like minimal unity of institutionalization, right? Institution tends to grow. It's like a natural flow. We don't want to grow. On the contrary, we want to keep it small. What is the minimal unit for an institution to function as an institution without becoming too big and too solid? So we want to keep it small in order not to grow, but to proliferate. We believe that what is interesting is not the three of us, the four of us talking today and 100 people, 130 people listening, but the fact that maybe at the same moment, 100 people are doing the same thing we're doing. So it's not about us reaching out as many people as possible, but us being able to proliferate, right? And so I just wanted to show you how we deal with space also in a different way when we talk about a program, what architects usually call program. I showed you the empty spaces, but at the end of the day, we also try to build also what we call like platforms for the commons. Instead of a coffee shop, as I said, or a library, or a fancy restaurant, we have a kitchen, we have a fruit and vegetable garden, we have an open library where people can come and exchange books. All of these projects are done also with artists. The free bookshop is done with Grupo Intero, the kitchen by Vitor Cesar and Carol Tonacci, which also brings me to something which I think is important to tackle, which is how the work happens between curators, artists, and institutions. And often the artists we work with do not want to be at the center. They want to work with other practices. And they want, because they identify in other practices like planting or cooking, something that connects to their artistic practices. And so how can we bring together artistic practices and other practices? And that's very taboo in the art world. We don't want the curator necessarily to become an artist, but we want to be able to understand how artists can collaborate with other practices, decentralizing the role of the artist also in the institution, which is quite complex to deal with, obviously. And now we're building a kindergarten with Graziella Kunsch, an artist who was participating in the last Documenta. It will come to Casa do Povo at the end of the year or next year, hopefully. And anyway, I'm concluding here. I don't want to talk more than I should, with only one reference to the architect called Yona Friedman that you might know. And Yona Friedman used to talk about makeable or doable or realizable, what is the best in English? I think it's doable utopias. And I think that's what we kind of work with. We want to have doable utopias, right? We want to create structures that can create other worlds. Because somehow when Adrienne says, do we have the institution we want? Maybe we have the institution we deserve. If we're only looking for consumption, if we have no time to give to the art, if we have no time to read, to listen to each other, to discuss, that's what we get. So maybe we should understand how we can definitely change the world from new institutions, but it's a complex communication between both. And I will stop here, and I hope we have more time, maybe on other occasions, to talk about governance, to talk about fundings, to talk about other issues that are very much connected to the way we work and to all the backstage, which is very much in the front stage of our work as curator and as an institution. Thank you very much.
I just want to thank you all. Those were really incredible presentations that have me kind of thinking 1,000 thoughts and having like not enough time to get into it with you, but we will use the time that we have as best we can. I guess, Benjamin, I want to kind of circle back to kind of where you stopped in a way. I was not planning this to be my first question, but since you laid it out, I think it's really maybe the most important place to start, which is about this sort of the structures that we've inherited culturally in terms of like what we expect institutions, to do, how we expect that we operate, how we believe that we should conduct our work. So I guess I have a question about what of these structures that are taken as givens to how we work as curators or artistic directors or as directors of institutions that we feel like fundamentally need to change. So for example, I often think about the hours of museums, right? I think, what are the whole sets of presuppositions that inform why we open at 10 a.m. and close at say 6? Like who are we expecting can actually come to the museum if those are our hours? And even if we have one day a week where it's open till 8 p.m., like what does that even mean, right? So I want to kind of throw that out in terms of just an example of something that is structural, that is taken as a given. I'm curious if there are others that you all believe that you have taken on yourselves in your organizations, or you would hope that we might be able to think more rigorously about. So anyone who wants to jump in, please do.
It's a great question. I'd like to jump in a little bit because this is something that we've been discussing at the museum and even at raw material, the opening access, actual opening times in terms of who are we working for and what is sort of, if I can use a political term, our constituents, so to speak. And I strongly believe that, the nature of the organization and institution, the size of the institution, the location and the context of the institution matter in all these kind of ideas and concerns. So, I mean, if you look at it from the museum perspective, and if you look at the metrics about the visitation of museums, all museum, first of all, museum as a format of a container of, display and engagement with art is one of the most successful format that exists across the globe. I mean, do we know, for instance, that almost 3 billion people visit museums every year across the globe? This is more than sports events together. So that says something, since I've become museum director, I've started looking at figures in a different way and what to translate. The opening hours, opening time where, we are all open, I don't know, from 10 to 6 every day. What does it bring us? They bring us, the majority of people who go to museum are tourists everywhere. And people on holiday, basically, of which, most of the time, most people, like every third person that goes to the museum that are not from the, from our trade and our industry, they go to the museum once in a while when they are on their holiday. So what does that tell us in terms of who are we speaking to, who are we engaging with? It tells a lot about that. So I'm very impressed with Benjamin, the experiences that you're doing with Casa de Povo in terms of, community building and not just community building, but really community engagement and inclusion into the process of institution making. It is very complex. It is very difficult. In Dakar, for instance, the raw material in itself has started as this art organization that makes exhibition, does residencies and so on. But over the course of a couple of years, we realized that this is not necessarily what an organization like RAW should be doing in Dakar. And we shifted the whole program of the organization to become the school that is not a school, to create this academy program to really feed into the necessity and the need for art professionals on the continent, on the one hand. On the other hand, also to link it, to a global international conversation, because I'm totally against the idea of, of the echo chamber that a lot of arts organization kind of in a geographic sense or even cultural specific arts organization can sort of fall into. So I think that, yes, it's quite important to continue to push those boundaries and those limits.
Thanks, Koyo. Anyone else want to respond to that?
Angela, do you want me to start? I would say that somehow we hope that every artwork is a world in potential, right? That there's something in artwork that's like a seed. And I believe the institution should adapt to the artwork. The institution should build the world that the artwork asks for, right? And often what we do is the other way around. We adapt the artwork to the institution. So it's very simple. It's very simple, just to need to change the direction of the arrow, right? Instead of asking the artworks to fit in, we should fit the institution to the artwork. And that's what we're trying to be doing, on a very small scale. But as I said, that's okay. In Casa de Povo, by giving out the key, we don't have any hours, as you said. We just have hours just to don't feel arrogant. So we can find on Google. But otherwise, we open always at night. We avoid to have a grid, like 5 exhibitions, seasons. We don't do that. Maybe because we don't need exhibition this year, and we need one the next year. And we don't work with a target audience. Who the target audience is someone who sells yogurt, I don't know, something like that. We work with the idea that the public is a construction, is a result, right, of what we do. So we don't target anyone, thank God, hopefully. And also this idea of being able to dilute decision making. Who takes the decision? Whose voice is listened to? So these are like very small answers and clues, right? We could go deeper in each of them, from the key to the hour, to the grid, to the fact that we have no rules, but we have common agreements. And all these are very small shifts, but at the end, the big picture is quite different. And the impression you have, the bodily impression you have when you enter the space is also very different.
Thank you, Benjamin. I wanted to go back to something that Angela had said, because I thought it was really interesting. But I think we should really circle back to the fact that All My Relations sits within a community development initiative, actually. And I was really struck by that because, and thank you, Angela, for pointing out the different prongs of the strategy of that. It made me think about the Free Southern Theater, which I've been spending a lot of time researching, actually, which was part of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee's multiple pronged effort to desegregate the South and this is in the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s, and to also register people to vote. So they had this initiative where one thread was voter registration. The other thread of their efforts were around sort of after school programs and summer school programs, so that people would come down and take folks who were in junior high or high school and give them summer school. The third leg of SNCC was this Free Southern Theater. And the force of art and the potential of art to actually change. And what was so, for me, radical about it is that they worked directly with people in the community to write the plays. Those people acted in the plays. And it became this opportunity for their stories to be told and to circulate and be presented to the community, almost as a testament, so that they understood themselves wholly. And I mean that on many, many different registers. So I just wanted you to talk about, since we were talking about structure, about sort of what it means, the importance of All My Relations being situated within this community development initiative.
Yeah, I think that because of where we're located, like we're in the heart of the American Indian Culture Corridor. So our audience, is our Native American relatives that come in and see themselves represented through the art that we present, and they understand it and can relate to it. One of my favorite memories is like one of those murals. We just gave our gallery to the mural artist, like use the walls. And a guy walked in and was like, hey, you painted my home, because of our creation story that was like tied into that mural. So I think like for our space, as part of that healing and the cultural understanding, having the visual arts play a role in that helps people to feel seen, understood, and to feel represented through the art that we share in our space.
Thanks for that. I also, maybe my last question, and then we can look quickly at the Q&A to see what's there. But as a curator, I've been realizing that so much of exhibition making or the presentation of performances is very much about telling a story. And I'm really I've been thinking a lot about what is embedded in those stories. So it's like the story that I want to tell curatorially, but then there's already, because of my education, a whole set of codified stories that this is what abstract art is, or this is the history of performance within the context of art history. And so I'm curious, and I think I've been trying to be a bit more rigorous and mindful about what I have inherited in terms of through my education and through growing up in the West, and because I work in museums, as what is the valid story to tell. In a way, this is not unrelated to the work of the Free Southern Theater, but what is the role of the autobiographical, the role of like the self-production of knowledge, the way we tell our own stories, or a kind of self-reference or self-knowledge that is always maybe the microcosm of something that is larger, that we call a cultural reference, or that's much bigger, so to speak. And so I've been thinking about what it might be of your own particular perspective, your own self-narrative that you feel like makes you do what you do differently, or is particular in the context of what you do as in your role. And that do you feel that it actually, that particularity enables you to speak to the whole, or to shift the way history or stories or culture is expressed and communicated and shared with your publics?
Yeah, I can go again. That's an expansive question, Adrienne. I don't know how we can answer it so quickly. I mean, for my part, I think that I entered the space of curatorial practice, particularly, I think, because of the possibilities of storytelling that artistic practice provides, and also because of the content and subjects that the vocabulary of artistic practice enables in many ways, and of course also for me personally, I personally deeply believe in servicing artists, and I came into curatorial practice at a time when the idea and the rise of the independent curator was at its maximum, in authorship, in power, in, omnipresence, so to speak. And this is something that has deeply, informed my practice, in the sense of exactly working against that model of, this authorial and omnipresence, but rather see how, my work can be an enabler of something. My practice can be enabling, passing through, mediating, helping. So to answer your question more precisely is, and because I work from a point of urgency. I work from a point of, I do the things that need to be done institutionally, curatorially, exhibition making, publication, you name it, because there is I came of age as an exhibition maker at a time where there was even a greater urgency to really feed into the artistic and institutional art landscape from an African perspective in Africa, and relate that to all Black geographies possible, because I think that the idea of understanding the continent as this kind of monolithic space is totally wrong, but in the contrary, the ways in which that the continent expands beyond its borders is really also something that is very much part of my exhibition making, institution making focus. So I think for my part, I can say urgency. And the very fact that, we all know the global situation, particularly here in America and elsewhere, talking from a place of resolute, unapologetic Blackness and being really militant about that, I think is also something that is the drive to my work.
Benjamin, Angela, either of you want to talk about doing this work from your own particular perspective?
Well, it's a tough question, because on the one hand, I would like to say that obviously we need to look at what we are, where we come from, and to be quite critical, to be able to understand also what is interesting there, but what is also a bias, I guess. And I would say that in my case, it's obviously a question that's very important to ask myself. Being a white person in Brazil, what does it mean? So this is something that has to be tackled and is tackled in my practice when I talk about be able to decentralize and only be responsible for 10% of the program of the institution that I'm arts director, is a kind of answer to that, to be able to understand that we can decentralize this decision making, which I think is very important in that case. At the same time, I would have my own, of course, personal, let's say, mythology in the sense of my own personal way of looking at my own history and how I ended up here, which is very much connected to the idea that we have an amazing privilege when we work with art and in art institutions, that instead of just thinking in the academical world, we have a thinking in action. We do stuff. And for me, that's very important to be able to do something. I came from a more academical background, but I was kind of frustrated to think that what I'm doing now might have some consequences in 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And because of this urgency that Koyo is talking about, I think I needed somehow to work on a more short term. And obviously, that's the last answer, the third answer I could give to your question, which is there's a limit to what we do, in the sense that I believe, for instance, that at first when I was like in 2012, I saw Casa Povo as an opportunity for a young curator. Now I realized that I was an opportunity for the building. I was devoured by the building. It used me somehow. And what is interesting about that is that it lowers my individual role. I'm the product of a context, of a history that comes way before me, and that allows me to do what can be done in its institution. And that I think is quite important to be also aware of, and to be also able to escape from that at one point.
Yeah, I can just share, for myself, like I'm, Native American. I was born and raised on a reservation, and I was taught, cultural values, throughout my life of like, take care of your elders, have this respect for your elders. And I apply that, through my position of that same mentality of being a good relative, which supersedes my work. It's not something that I was, like educated, on a specific genre of art. Like I can't clock out being Native American. And so that comes out in the work that I do and how I operate, hold myself in my role, and how I work with artists and share and treat the artist's work and the topics, and having an understanding of the topics that the artists are bringing about, because I know that I get it. I've lived it, so that's something that just kind of comes out of not something that I was trained in. It's a lived experience.
Thank you all for offering that. We had a lot of questions about how museums and institutions can work more collaboratively around work that all of your work and commitments represent. And I don't know, I feel like in some ways we've touched on that. I think there were also just other questions around the current interest, Angela in particular, for Indigenous artists and their work, this sort of like drive that always comes around catching up that is, I would argue, very complicated. So yeah, if any of you feel compelled to respond to that, please do now.
I guess I could share in terms of like making space for these voices that need to be in your institutions, not just as a part-time temporary contracted role, invest in advisory, invest in, people on your board that have different perspectives, that are Native American, that can work on making that change that needs to happen. Myself in particular, it's challenging to, in my space where I'm at, I'm good because I have advocacy and I have support and I can speak up about these issues and support the artists that I work with. But if I was to go into a larger art institution, my voice would once again become the marginalized voice in the room, and I wouldn't have that same level of support. And so that's kind of where it's challenging for me in terms of like, I could leave for something bigger, better, but I would lose a very big part of like what I value in my work, which is being able to have my voice being heard.
Thank you, Angela. And really, thank you to Benjamin, Koyo, you all. This was such a pleasure. I'm so grateful for this conversation with you. Some of you, we've had a long-standing conversation, so we're just building, and I look forward to continuing it with the rest of you. Really, really grateful for all that you've shared today. And thank you to the Armory team and Nicole for organizing and giving us a good reason to come together.
Thank you so much, Adrienne. Thank you, panelists. And we had some questions about where this will live. We've recorded it, and soon it will be available on the Armory Show website, thearmoryshow.com. So thank you, everyone. A fantastic discussion. Learned so much, and we look forward to seeing you in September at the actual Curatorial Leadership Summit in person. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you, Angela, Nicole, and the Armory team. Thank you, Adrienne, for considering me into this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.